help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to What's the Rush, where we dive into the moments that shape us far beyond or underneath the spotlight. And today's guest, Lisa Congdon, is such a powerhouse of creativity, courage, and color. She lives her life in full color. She's an internationally acclaimed artist, author of 10 books. I have three of them sitting right here next to me, and I'm a big fan of her work. She's also a cyclist and an advocate for mental health and social justice that you see in her life and in her work. And Lisa didn't find her creative calling until nearly 40, which is something we share. A lot of you think I'm been a mountain biker my whole life, but I found mountain biking at 38. So that's something we share, we'll get into. And discovering our true past a little later is kind of exciting. And then going all in once she discovered it. She's is proof that really it's never too late to begin. It's never too late to evolve and to boldly own and be who you really are at your core. So, Lisa Congdon, I am so excited to talk to you, and welcome to What's the Rush?
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So let's start with, we talk about definitions and labels all the time. And of course, I introduce you as artist, cyclist. And so I'm curious, when you meet someone out and about on a bike ride and you're like, hi, I'm Lisa, what comes out in your introduction of yourself?
Well, it's so funny. If I'm on my bike, I don't. So cycling in the cycling world for me, I mean, now, I make art in the cycling industry. And so a lot of people know me from that, like in the cycling world. But part of what was so amazing for me when really got into cycling, um, was that nobody knew who I was. And I'm pretty well known in the art world and
Yeah.
and I have a big Instagram following. And so it was so refreshing for me to be around people where it was just like I was just this I was just like a regular person, I mean, I truly am a regular person, but
Right.
I think, if people know that, I have 500,000 Instagram followers, or that, I designed this thing or that thing, it instantly changes the relationship.
Mhm.
I'm sure you get this sometimes too. If people know who you are, what your legacy is, you know, and for me, cycling was this sort of like this place that I could be anonymous. And so oftentimes when I'm on the bike and people are like, hey, I'm Joe, what's your name? What do you do? I'll tell people I'm an artist, but I don't really elaborate very much
Yeah.
because I don't want people to get fixated on that part of it. Yesterday I went out for a gravel ride. I had knee replacements at the end of last year, and so I'm just getting back into riding on gravel. And I got to the top of the, climb where I was, and there was a bunch of guys hanging out. And I have this really kind of crazy looking bike that I had custom painted. It's got my artwork all over it. And of course, I'm wearing this kit that I designed for my coach, Serena, that has my artwork all over it. And there's a Bivo bottle with my artwork all over it. And um, these guys look at me and they're like, wow, you look amazing. And like, your kit matches your bike. And I'm like, well, it's not an accident. I designed all of this stuff and I had my Smith sunglasses on. And, they of course had a million questions for me and we got to talking about it. And it was also like, as much as I like being anonymous, it was also a cool moment of like, oh yeah, like I can wear my art on my bike, and these two worlds that I have that are so important to me and bring me such richness and joy, like have intersected in this really beautiful way. So, so yeah, like I like being just a regular bike racer or bike rider, but I also am pretty um happy with and really proud of like the place that I've made in the cycling world over the last few years. And the fact that I get to be, a creative force in that world is super satisfying for me.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of your really cool collaborations where you've been able to bring your art and your career and into collaborations to give back to cycling. So to bring your art into the cycling space and design glasses and
Mhm.
bikes and kits. Um, I'm curious about, okay, so let's go back. If you're introducing yourself in the art world, then how would that be different? Say you're in, you've got, I don't know what it is,
I'm
what,
like at a professional conference or
yeah,
something.
or
Yeah.
an opening or something like that.
Yeah, I think that I introduce myself as an artist and an illustrator. I mean, as an illustrator, my job is a little different than sort of the work that I make that's just for me,
Hmm.
um, or for a gallery show. Illustration is a profession where it's similar to graphic design in that you're typically hired to make things that other people want you to make for them or for a product. And there's a lot of art direction involved. Like, we love your style, we want you to do you, but we also want you to, do this thing.
Yeah.
Um, and it needs to have these colors and it needs to speak to this narrative
Yeah.
or whatever. And I really love that work because I get to take all of my own creativity, but I get to kind of channel it for something very specific. Like, I'm a Capricorn, so I'm like really a hard worker and I'm very disciplined and all of that, but I also really like kind of constraints,
Mhm.
um, which is why a lot of my artwork has this, uses only 7 colors, or, is uses kind of like a similar sensibility. I really like having, you know, people tell me, we want you to do it. We want you to do it this way. Some people hate working that way. They
Mhm.
only want to make the work they want to make. And that kind of work isn't right for them. And I really love it. I love taking art direction. I love the satisfaction of like creating something that somebody else has a vision for but can't execute themselves, right? They hire me to execute it. And I've gotten really good at it because I've been doing it for a long time. And um, so that's sort of the illustration part of what I do. I also have what's called a fine art practice, which means I make every couple of years I have a show in either a museum or a gallery. And I don't do it very often. Like, every couple of years is on purpose because it's just a ton of work. So right now I'm getting ready for a show that opens in the middle of July, and I'm just making paintings and they're whatever I want them to be. I actually, when I was recovering from knee replacement surgery, I started keeping this collage sketchbook to keep my mind occupied. And I loved the work that I was making in my sketchbook. So now I'm making paintings of the collages, and everything in my brain sort of connects in that way. Um, and I also do a little bit of coaching, professional coaching. So I run a program with my friend Emily, and we um, run these 6-month programs for people who are running an art business and
Mhm.
wanting to know how to do. It's not just about making more money. It's really about having like work-life balance and managing your time well and all of that. So we cover like a ton of topics. And I do a fair bit of writing as well. So I swore when I wrote my 10th or 11th book that I was never going to write a book again, but now I'm working on another one with a friend. So um, yeah, so those are sort of like the big buckets of what I do, occasional public speaking. And
That you're
yeah.
bringing like the business of art that you're because when you said, oh, I'm coaching, I was immediately like, oh, and like thinking I want to sign up and learn to be an artist. But the business of art, I think it's so important when a passion, and I'm applying this to me, it's like I'm an athlete, but the business of being an athlete is actually, I consult with people, not officially, but people ask me about that a lot more than like, how do you go faster on the bike? Because you can get a coach for that, but this sort of path of being an entrepreneur is really hard to be.
It's so hard. And it's something that When I started, there weren't a lot of resources available. The internet wasn't what it is now, and I ended up writing a business book for artists, and that was actually a really long time ago. It probably needs to be updated, but so much has changed in the last 10 years. But um, and part of the reason I wrote that book is because it didn't exist for me,
Yeah.
you know. And now there are all kinds of business books for artists and classes and coaching programs. And it's really wonderful because it's not, when you go to, I didn't go to art school, but when you go to art school, um, I think they're getting better at teaching the business part of it, the entrepreneur part of it.
Mm.
But back in the day, like there was really not much beyond a professional practice class that was probably not super developed. And so there's still a real need for it. There's never been a better time to be an artist, I believe. And that's because all of these resources
Yeah.
exist for how to make it your living. I mean, how many talented people existed for so many years, but never pursued it as their career path because there was no way to sell your work. I mean, now the internet makes it so easy, and it's really pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we have parallel paths in that way. We're the same age, 56, and
No, I'm
oh,
57.
you're 57. Okay, we're the demographic,
We're
same.
almost the same age.
I'm almost 57, and we're also women pushing into industries at a time, like you said, when there weren't resources, wasn't a path for you or for me. And so, I mean, I definitely resonate with that you sort of made it up as you
Mhm,
went along and you figured it out. And then now that you're sharing what you've learned with a ton of people. So we definitely are on that same kind of
mhm. There are a
trajectory.
lot of parallels there, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I want to go. I mean, you found your calling, of art around the same time I found mountain biking, which I had a whole sports career. It was still sports, but I had a whole career long before leading up into cycling. And I hadn't planned any of that. But I'm curious that pivot point for you and sort of how you found that art was going to be your career, and then sort of making that like teeter totter shift between it maybe being a passion or being a side project to like being your job
Yeah.
play out.
Well, I my first job was I was an elementary school teacher.
Mhm.
I mean, I had jobs before that, but my first, like, adult job, I went to school for that after I graduated from college. I went and got my teaching credential, and, I loved teaching. It was hard. I taught in San Francisco in pretty inner city school, environment, and, found myself woefully unprepared. Um, did my very best, but, was pretty stressful for me, teaching in the public school system. I was super committed to it, but it was hard. And the school where I worked got a grant, um, for a lot of money. This is back in the Clinton years, and, when education was very well funded. And, my school got this grant, and they put me in charge of sort of managing the grant money. And I got to step out of the classroom. I had been a teacher for about 7 or 8 years, but I got to step out of the classroom and kind of manage the change efforts that were underway at the school and how we were going to use the money to improve, education for the kids at the school, and got really deep into that work. And I ended up going to work for the nonprofit organization um, that had get funded, the was the intermediate organization between the government funds and the money that we ended up using. And I went to work for that organization and ended up working there for a very long time. And when I left teaching, I'd never identified as an artist, but I'd always been a kind of creative person. Like, I'm in touch still with some of my students who my first year of teaching, I taught 4th grade, and they're all in their, like, early 40s now, which is kind of crazy to think about, but, or mid 40s even. Um, but they all remember these art projects that I used to do with them. And so I look back and I'm like, "Oh, that creative person was always there. I just didn't identify in that way at all." And so when I went to work in an office, I really felt like, "Oh, wait, I don't have as much creative space as I did when I was teaching." And so I started taking art classes. and kind of, I was really into sewing at the time, and I set up like a sewing room in my apartment, and I got a camera and I was experimenting with digital photography. And I look back now and I was really in this period of searching,
Mm.
like I was in my 30s and wanted to try to figure out, like, I knew I wanted to be a creative person. I never imagined it could be a career,
Yeah.
much like I'm sure you couldn't have imagined being a mountain biker could have been your career. But I just was so interested in it that I just wanted to do it during, my off hours because it fed me in a way that lots of things didn't. And so I eventually, started taking classes and started making stuff and started, selling stuff here and there. This was kind of before social media. I was like going around to shops in my neighborhood where I lived in San Francisco and being like, oh, I make these pillows. Will you sell them? And, I make these paintings. Can I have a show here? And people said yes. And I just kind of started like having an art practice. And I started a blog and I started referring to myself as an artist. And I kind of like didn't wait for other people to give me permission. And I think by this point I was in my late 30s.
Mhm.
And I think something happens when you're on the precipice of 40, you start sort of like kind of claiming your own power, or I don't know, you know, not waiting for other people to tell you it's okay to do things. I just was like, I'm just going to try this. And I loved it so much that I was like, maybe I could do this all of the time. And I knew that wasn't going to happen overnight. I owned an apartment in San Francisco. I had a mortgage. You know, I had a full-time job where I was making really good money at this nonprofit. But, eventually I decided to leave my job. I went part-time at first and then left and kind of started this creative life and was very broke at first, but very determined to make my way. And I started befriending people who were mentoring me, and I chose to be in relationship with people who knew more than I did, and I learned a lot from them. And I sort of, like you said, I was sort of making things up as I went along. And I would say the first 5 or 6 years I was pretty broke and um you know struggling financially, but also had a vision in my head for what I wanted my life to become. And I just never strayed from it. And um, I don't even think I could have imagined at the time that I would run a studio with full time employees and work for the clients that I've worked for and, have work that's been in museums. Like, I don't think that I could have ever fathomed that, but I was determined to make something of, what I love to do. And I'm self-taught, so it took me a while to also not just to develop the business skills, but to develop my art skills. But I didn't give up and I just kept going and here we are. I don't know how many years later. It's been almost 20 years. So,
Amazing.
it was my second career, but I feel like I've been doing it forever.
Yeah. Well, did you ever have to, well, we were both broke about the same period of time. I was living in my car, eating ramen noodles and tuna
Yep.
cans, and, you know,
Yep.
that was kind of the diet. And I also didn't have a coach. I mean, I had a coach in high school when I started running and in college for a little while as far as an athletic coach. And then I didn't have a coach or anyone teaching me anything until, as far as sports go, until, yeah, like 38, 39. And so that whole period, same as you in my 30s of like, okay, I was running a rock climbing gym and doing some cool stuff and having a real job, and left a dream job to live out of my car and just
Mhm.
say yes to these opportunities with people more experienced than I was, to go like sidle up to like
Mhm.
really, really good athletes and just be like, try to hang on for dear life.
Yes.
I want to ask you for, I mean, it's, I don't know, it's such a like amazing story, but I want to ask, in that transition, obviously, of like financial risk, probably maybe some imposter syndrome, or like, what if this doesn't work? Like, I want to ask about that, some of the challenges, but
Mhm.
then I'm also really curious about when your passion and your thing you do that you love becomes your career and your livelihood. Does that shift sometimes the joy in it
Mhm.
and the playfulness? And so I'd love to know a little
Yeah.
bit about the shaping of that trajectory.
Yeah. So there were so many challenges. I mean, financial challenges are hard. By this point, I had sort of started a relationship that I'm now married to the person that I met. I was still a few years in, but still very broke. And I remember at one point I had to ask her if I could borrow money. And I had been sort of not managing my money well. So I didn't have a lot and I wasn't very good at managing it. And she basically was like, um, so if you can't get your shit together, like we're done. So that was a big motivator for me to, I mean, I'd already had aspirations to become you know, a successful artist, whatever that meant. But I also was sort of motivated also by like staying in the good graces of this person that I had fallen in love with. So that helped. Um, and I had a tremendous amount of imposter syndrome, although it was in this weird period. So, in the first few years of making stuff, I was definitely not paying attention to who was paying attention to me. Um, there was no imposter syndrome because I was a nobody. I
Yeah.
wasn't, I hadn't reached um, any sort of benchmarks for success. That eventually happened.
Well, it's
And
you were in
that's
anonymity stage, like you where it was
right.
like no, there's no risk because of like, will they like my stuff? Because you're
Yeah.
unknown.
You're unknown. That's
Yeah,
right. I think imposter syndrome really happens when you start to experience
yeah,
success and people paying attention to you. And then you question whether you belong or whether or not you deserve the accolades. And it was such a profound period for me. So I went from that to then people noticing, and I started, I got on social media when an Instagram account, and people, I started having opportunities coming my way. And that's when it really started because for one, I was sort of at the same place in my career at in my 40s that a lot of people were in their 20s
hmm,
because I started so late. And um I think that kind of lent itself to my sense of imposter syndrome. Like, who am I? Like, I'm just this older woman who, I don't know what I'm doing. I never went to school. Um, back in the day, I used to share a studio with some other artists, and I would literally, this was even before imposter syndrome, but I think it was those sort of underpinnings. Um, I would the studio space was really open, and so everyone could see what everyone else was doing. And because I had never learned to paint, I taught myself. I didn't think I was doing it right. I assumed I was doing it wrong, and that the other people in the studio would be judging me
mm,
for watching me do it wrong.
hmm.
And I realize now, like, no one was watching, and there's no right or wrong way to paint, first of all. I know that now, but I didn't know that then because, I
Well,
taught myself.
for me to know because I'm like this baby budding artist who wants to make some things and I have no skill. So I love
Well,
that no right way.
that's right. And there are smarter ways to paint and smarter ways to do things for sure. And you learn those things along the way. But everyone does things their own way. Even people who've been schooled in a certain way might
Yeah.
still end up doing their things their own way. And so I was plodding along, so insecure about that sort of underneath the surface that I wasn't doing things right. And then I started to experience success, and immediately now I'm way past this now. So this is me looking back, and sometimes it's even hard for me to remember what I felt like for that sort of 5 or 6 year period of when I first started to, be featured on blogs and there would be a magazine article about me and things would, and I was like so panicked all the time that I was going to get called out for being a fake or being a fraud.
Uh-huh.
And it, of course, never happened, but like it was so terrifying for me. And eventually, I want to say in my late 40s, early 50s, I I was working with this meditation teacher at the time, and we really kind of started to dive into this insecurity that I was having around being a fraud.
Yeah.
We really started to unpack it because we would meditate together and then we would talk about, emotionally what was going on for me. And
Integration. You were
yeah, and
integrating.
I really started to understand that this fear I had was really just a reflection of my own deep seated feelings about not being enough or not ever being enough or being good enough at anything. And I really just started to shed all of that. And I literally woke up one day and I was like, this is absolute bullshit. Like, I am holding myself back from greatness by worrying that I'm doing it wrong or that I'm going to get caught or some terrible thing is going to happen. And I was so paranoid all of the time. And I just literally woke up one day and was like, I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
I'm done. And I like pretty much moved on. I don't know. It was this miraculous moment. They say things don't happen like in moments like that. And I think it was really the culmination of this work I had been doing and also my age and being tired of being anxious about that particular thing all of the time. And I think it really served me well because I didn't really, I mean, I had been riding my bike since I was 28, but I didn't really get into cycling until I was in my early 50s.
Mhm.
And it was such good practice for me to be like, why not me? And
Yeah.
also, I don't have to be the best or super fast or whatever to do hard things. I can do this, even if I'm not as good as other people my age, or even if I'm not as good as, everyone else out there. And so, um, moving through that imposter syndrome as an artist, um, really helps me now do other things that are hard or challenging or that I don't have a ton of experience with,
Yeah.
and just own them. And yeah, it was kind of a profound experience for me. And now it's funny, I really do feel very grounded in who I am as an artist and my style and like what I do and how I do it. And really like I'm considered a leader in my industry, and I don't feel weird about that at all. I I feel like it's a privilege and an honor, and that's really it. But it took me a while to get there. And so if you are suffering from imposter syndrome, it is something you can get over. I really do believe that.
Well, and I will say a lot of these comments sound really familiar and with myself, but other
Mhm.
high performing women that I know thinking that we're not enough, we're not doing enough, we're not good enough. The first article that was written about me mountain biking, it was the first 24-hour race I did solo. I beat all the men and I was not a cyclist. I like ran all the downhills, but I had endurance, but terrible bike rider. And the second race I did was national championships and I won it. And the third race I did was the world championships and I got second. And they wrote an article about me in like bicycling or something and it was called Winning Ugly. And I was all proud, like, oh my God, like I made it into a bike magazine. And they basically said, how is this girl winning? She sucks at riding a bike, but like she can keep going for a long time. And so it kind of like I didn't have the skill, but I had the mindset and the endurance and from my other sports careers and I knew how to eat and take care of myself and but I couldn't ride a bike. And
But
so
that's the thing. It's like I learned, similar to you, I learned the skill eventually. Now I have skill. I can teach drawing. I can teach painting. I can at least impart knowledge about how I approach things, and every artist is different. But that the skill can be learned. And I think what for me, and it sounds like for you, was the real difference is that I had this mindset of I'm going to do this. I want to do this. I'm very determined.
Right.
And like despite the doubts I had about myself, I didn't let them stop me. So, I mean, that's the whole irony of my situation is that I had all of this insecurity, but it didn't, I think for a lot of people, either insecurity or the pain of growth. Like you don't become a good artist by wishing you were a better artist. You become a better artist by like drawing and painting and practicing and making shitty stuff. You don't become a better cyclist by sitting around. You have to get on the bike and work really hard all of the time. You have to put in the work. And despite the fact that I was very, at the time, insecure about my place in the art world and the illustration world and all of that, and whether I deserved to be there, I still didn't stop me from working. And so many people, they let that fear stop them. It's like think about how many people could potentially become great artists or great cyclists who will never see that because they're so afraid of not doing it perfectly or not doing it right, or not being able to show up for all of the work that's required. And I feel like in some ways that's what separates people who reach some level of greatness from everyone else. It's not that we're more talented or we have some innate skill. You learn that. It's that we have this mindset that we don't want to give up, and we're
What
willing to put in the work.
what kept the drive going in the sort of dark moments, or the making shitty art, or like this isn't fun, or maybe I should do something else? Like what did keep your drive going?
Well, first of all, I think I want to acknowledge too that when you start things later in life, and by later I mean like in your 40s or beyond, you have all of this life experience that tells you that hopefully that putting in work pays off. Hopefully you've had some of that life experience where you've actually sat in the discomfort long enough to see the benefits.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think there is an advantage to being older. Sometimes, we think of it as a disadvantage, but it's actually an advantage because I do think we have more ability to endure. We have more endurance, right? And for me, I had this like knowledge of like a new myself,
Hmm.
enough to know that like if I worked hard enough, something was going to happen. And also I wanted it badly enough. So for me, it was part of getting through dark moments was just keeping my eye on where I wanted to get and remind myself that I wasn't going to get there overnight. And I'm dealing with that right now. Like I had this phone call with my coach Serena this morning, who you also know Serena, and I was like admitting to her that, I had these knee replacements and I was really off the bike for about 6 months. And I had to start from scratch. My FTP's in the toilet and I gotta and I have new knees and I'm still dealing with some pain and stiffness. And I admitted to her that I'm ashamed of my numbers right now because I'm starting to do harder rides, but I'm doing them much more slowly than I normally would and with way less power. And then I'm having all of these feelings of kind of like embarrassment, even though it makes perfect sense that, I have this there's this very logical reason why my performance isn't what it was 6 or 9 months ago before I had my surgeries. And that I'm using that as motivation, but I'm also having to remind myself that just because I've been back on the bike for, a month doing some harder efforts doesn't mean that tomorrow my FTP is going to be 211 again. You know, it's like it's going to take 6 months for me to get back there, but I got to keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep doing the work, even when it's hard, even when there's not a reward. And I think back in the beginning of my art career, it was a similar thing. Like I just knew that in order to get where I wanted to go, I had to keep going. I had to keep working. And there was no like magic pill or, thing that I could do that was going to speed up the process. And we're being sold that all the time, like take this supplement and you're going to be stronger and menopause is going to suck less or whatever. And really, it's all bullshit. Like you just have to show up and do the work every day. And the older you get, the harder it is. So,
I
I mean, in
want
some ways, work
to
is easier, but
I want to go into this example a little bit because one, I relate to you of like the shame or embarrassment of showing up at a group ride or showing up with your community when you were at one level before and then you're at a different level before. I mean, that's very much where I'm at in being a former competitive athlete to then having a 3.5 year concussion recovery where I basically stopped doing anything. And I don't show up for group rides. There's only a few people. I'm just starting to like get back to my relationship with riding and being out. And I do a lot of stuff alone because I'm a world champion athlete. And
Mhm.
if someone goes on a ride with me, they're gonna be like, whoa,
Whoa, yeah.
what happened to you? And while there's a reason, and I've been vocal, and it's a lot of this podcast of like, yeah, I was injured and I'm trying to come back just like anybody else. What I'm interested in though is that that's on a physical realm. And you've worked and made it as an artist, but I can imagine, and I would love to know, like, you never like then stopped doing art or lost all of your skill and had to like work back from zero to your art. Whereas a physical thing, it does go, you lose it. Whereas you're never going to lose the skill and the accolades and what you've attained as an artist. So I don't know. I don't even know what my question is. It's kind of an interesting thing where you're learning lessons in art, you're taking them into cycling, but I don't know. Have you ever had that big drop off in art? Like you
Well, I
about,
mean, I think it happens on a more of a micro level all the time. So I will spend, you know, uh, months only drawing on my iPad. So a lot of my illustration work is digital, and I discovered digital drawing back in 2017. It's only been about 8 years, but um, before that, I like literally drew everything with pencils and pens and paint and ink. Um, and digital drawing really changed my life and changed my art practice for the better. It's such an efficient way to work. I could go on and on about it forever. But anyway, I still paint though, and I will go months and months and months without picking up a paintbrush,
Mhm,
because I only have a show every couple of years. And every time I start painting again, I have to take many deep breaths and remind myself, to ease into the process and that, it's like a muscle. If you don't work it,
mhm,
you know, the muscle, atrophies. And painting is definitely one of those things for me. Like it takes me a while to get back into the groove.
mhm,
And I do feel very lucky that, barring losing my hands, especially my right hand, because that's the hand that I draw with and paint with, that I do feel really lucky that art is something that I will always have access to. I mean, obviously, potentially a brain injury or something. There are scenarios in which I would have to relearn all of those things. But God forbid. But I haven't had to experience that. For the most part, I've kind of like, because I am a professional artist, I make art every single day, that is something that I have, access to all of the time. I think you asked a question earlier about, when something becomes your job, and I
yeah,
don't think I answered it. And, you know, I, I also went through a period where, between when I first started and things were a job, but mostly my job was hustling for work because I didn't have a lot of paid work, to then making it, right? So very similar period where I was experiencing imposter syndrome. I was also very stressed out all of the time because I had work. No one was working for me. I also ran an online shop. So I was like packing and shipping all my own orders.
mm,
My business was growing, but I was at that point where I couldn't afford to pay an employee or even an assistant. And so I was doing everything myself. And um, so much of it wasn't creative work, and it just felt like a chore. Like I was pretty miserable.
yeah,
Um, I feel like I've found this sweet spot now because fortunately for me, I built a business that afforded me, you know, one employee and then two employees. And now I have 2.5 employees and several freelancers who do regular work for me. And so I've gotten to take back my creative practice. And yes, I manage my team and,
Yeah.
I do have some things I have to do that are not art making, but really most of my job is making art because they run my retail business and a lot of other aspects of the operations of my business. And so that's been a real gift. I also, I only work 4 days a week now. So I've really been forced to sort of limit what I take on.
Mm.
Um, to be manageable for me. And that's been a really important kind of like piece in like having enough downtime that when I do work Monday through Thursday, that those days are I'm excited about them and they're more joyful because I have enough time on my bike and away from art that I'm not working all of the time, which is part of what I felt for many years. Um, and I went through this process a couple of years ago where I just quit a lot of things because I felt overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And no matter what your job is, if you're doing your job all of the time and you're also trying to manage all these other things in your life, um, it zaps you of creativity and energy. And um, even if you loved what you did before, even if you have a dream job, and I feel like I do have a dream job, it becomes unbearable if you're just working all the time.
Yeah, and as an entrepreneur, you've got to put your head down in the beginning and you've got to wear all the hats. You've got to do all the things. You've got to hustle for the contracts. You've got to,
Yes.
like you said, you've got
Yeah.
to ship things, put labels on, like, yeah. And either you make it through that phase where then you can get more support, or many entrepreneurs don't make it through that sort
Mhm.
of all consuming phase, the caterpillar phase, where then you can maybe transform into the butterfly eventually. But it's a pretty hard process in the building
Mhm.
phase of anything. And I know for me in sport, there's been times where, the hustle of, annual contracts and all this, plus you need to win races, plus you need to be successful, plus you need to like, do all that. And then you can lose your job at the end of the year just because of a contract. Same, you may not
Mhm.
sell a piece of art. And so there is kind of no safety net other than work.
No, and it's very risky. It feels like, in some ways, like I'm a freelance artist, you're a freelance athlete and athlete influencer, and it's like you don't really know. And every year, the last 5 years, I had one year where I made a shit ton of money and had a bunch of jobs and like things were rolling in. And then, I've had years where I've barely been scraping by and couldn't even pay myself.
Yeah.
So, it requires a lot of like showing up even though you don't know what's going to happen next
Mhm.
and a lot of uncertainty.
I did a TED talk a while back, almost 8 years ago now, that I called Navigating Home. And the gist of it was after I went and did a ride on the Ho Chi Minh Trail to connect
Yeah.
with where my father died in the Vietnam War. And it was a bike ride initially, a big endurance ride that became a film and everything. And when I sort of processed and talked about it for the first time in public was a TEDx talk in Sun Valley, and I called it Navigating Home. And the gist of it was basically that what I was looking for in my career of like winning Leadville and winning this and doing that, what I was looking for wasn't going to be found on the top of a podium. Um, I mean, I needed to seek and find that, but eventually that adventure ride and connecting with a bigger purpose and launching my foundation helped me understand that I needed to navigate all the way back around to that kid who liked to play in the dirt and who liked to go exploring and adventuring and bring other people along for the party. And it makes me think a little bit about how you were saying your creativity was always there as a part of you, and it sort of needed to develop and manifest, and you're maybe now at a time coming back around that it's this amazing part of your life, but not all consuming, and just a different kind of a win or accolade. I mean, when you need to sell art or you need to keep your career going as an entrepreneur, I mean, you do need outside. accolades in order to keep doing the thing that you love doing. But
Yes.
it becomes a sticky relationship sometimes.
Yeah, totally. It does. And I mean, I'm already thinking about retirement just so I can ride my bike more, but
Me too.
but like I will never stop making art. Retirement for me means just like potentially closing down the business part of my practice, and not that I won't still do some work in the industry and like take on some work here and there, but um one of the greatest gifts of the last few years has just been, or really just kind of like getting into cycling and um having more downtime to do things like read and just exist without working all of the time, has just opened up this kind of portal for me
Yeah.
into so many other things. Like because I started late, I think that I had this sense of urgency about establishing myself, and I'm kind of by nature a hustler. And then all of a sudden I woke up one day and I was like, oh, I did all of that. I did all of the stuff that I set out to do. And I want to still love doing it. And so how can I set up my life so that I still love to make art and put it out into the world, but that it's not everything? Because um I'm a happier person when I have friendships and adventures and other things going on in my life that um I mean, I feel like cycling came into my life at the perfect time, or reintroduced itself to my life at the perfect time. It was like during the pandemic. I was already on a cycling team and, writing a decent amount, but during the pandemic, I discovered gravel cycling and just kind of went all in. I'm an all in person. And it made me realize, like, oh, there's so much more to life than making art and selling art. Like I actually want to do other things, and I can pour that energy into other things that are meaningful to me. Um and that's been so profound. Like I hate that the pandemic happened, but I could go on and on about all of the things that changed in my life for the better during that time.
Why is cycling important to you? And can you articulate why it's become such this core part of your life? And, the expression of your body when you've got a creative mindset as your sort of core values. Like, what is cycling to you? Why is it important?
Well, I think there's kind of I think about two kind of buckets of things that it's given to me. So one of them is just sort of like I used to be a competitive swimmer when I was growing up, and in my 20s into my 30s, I swam competitively, coached a master's team, and swimming was really important to me, and I sort of rode a bike on the side. And so I know what it feels like to push my body and to like that feeling of exhilaration when you're training and you like achieve things. And I've been a competitive athlete, not at your level, but like, you know, as an adult and, as a teenager and as an adult, for most of my life. But as I've gotten older, I think I sort of lost touch with that, really pushing myself. I think I stopped doing that somewhere in my 30s. I quit competitive swimming around the time I was 40 to really kind of focus on this new art career I had, because swimming took up so much time. And, I was still working out and going to the gym and stuff, but like I had like 10 years where I was really a competitive athlete. And I remember even when I started cycling, some of my teammates were like, you should race. And I'd be like, no, thanks. I'm traumatized from competitive swimming, you know? And eventually, when I discovered gravel cycling, the whole mullet analogy, like business in the front, party in the back, like there's you can show up however you are and be part of this community. And it's so different than road cycling, which super intimidated me.
Mhm.
And anyway, so this idea of just like, okay, I'm going to do this really hard race and I'm going to like push myself really hard. And that feeling of just doing hard things in my 50s, there was like nothing like it. And it didn't even compare to the way I pushed myself when I was younger. And I had done some hard bike rides and stuff when I was younger, and definitely some hard swimming events. But I don't know. There was this joy that I found in type 2 fun that I was like, wow, I'm really cut out for this. And maybe I discovered that a little late in life, but it's not too late for me to go all in with it. And then I hired a coach, and I just kind of got really invested in getting stronger, getting faster, pushing myself to my outer limit, like physically. I don't even think I've gotten there yet because now I have new knees, so who knows what is possible. Um, so there's that part of it, that physicality, the like, oh my God, I just did this really hard thing and I am so exhausted, but I am so happy. Like that just was so great. And then the other part of it, which is connected to that, is the community. Like
Mhm.
I have made so many friends in the last 5 years that, and am literally part of the gravel cycling establishment now. And I'm a 57-year-old, mediocre to above mediocre cyclist. Like I'm not, I can win some, I've won races here and there out of, probably because other people didn't show up, but like, I'm not that great of a cyclist.
That happened to me too. So
But I, but because the community that we have, especially in gravel cycling, is so special, people are like, oh, come be part of it. You want to be part of it, you are part of it. And I think, sure, it's helpful that I have like this artistic repertoire, which lends itself to designing things in the cycling industry. And people have really like, asked me to do that. And that's been great. Um, so I've gotten to really, as I mentioned earlier, like meld these two parts of me that are really important. But it's been such a welcoming, inclusive space. So I've made all these friends. I'm part of the community now. And I also get to show up as a leader in the community now, and I get to give back in certain ways. And so the experience of being at stage races and camping, or, going to events and seeing friends you haven't seen for a year, and kind of following along other people's, progress on social media. It's just, to me, it's like, it's so fun. It is so exciting. I just really love it. And it gives my life all of this kind of purpose and meaning outside of
Mhm.
art making. And art making gives my life a lot of purpose and meaning. And my work can be very political, and I do make work around certain causes, and my work is very meaningful to me. But the fact that I have this other part of my life that is also very meaningful and gratifying makes my life so much better. Like I I can't even begin to describe how much cycling has changed my life in the last 5 years and made my life better. And that's why I love it. It's just like, it's the gift that keeps giving.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on so many things that are, you know, um, psychology based, neuroscience. I mean, you talked about our need for community, which is essential for survival as, hang on, stop it. Um, we talk about, uh, community, which is essential for our survival as humans. And in in COVID and then our digital world, like we are getting less and less and less and less connected, um, in some ways. And you also, something maybe that cycling does that art doesn't, um, movement is medicine. I mean, when you move your body, there are all sorts of hormones and neurochemicals and circulation and blood flow and all sorts of feel good, basically free drugs that are happening. Dopamine, serotonin, things that are happening that make people feel better, whether even if they're cycling or moving alone. But then you add in the community aspect of it, of going to an event or being with people, and you're describing, what science is describing is we need to do these things more often. But for some reason, it's a big mission of mine is to get people outside moving together. And it's part of why I launched Private Idaho. It's part of why, the gist of this podcast is that we have this medicine to go
Mhm.
outside and move. Um, and I'm interested because when I stopped moving during my concussion, I actually, um, kind of started feeling this urge to draw or paint or make things, and find another outlet kind of that you're talking about that might make me feel good because I wasn't feeling good. And so I'm interested in maybe the comparison of what does art give the brain and what does art give us that is another kind of medicine.
Yeah, I was really worried when I right before I had my knees replaced. I had they were about 7 weeks apart, and so I was gonna be off the bike and not really able to move much except walk for a very long time. And everyone who knows me was like, you know, "Cycling is your medicine. Like, are you gonna fall into a deep depression? Are you gonna become anxious? And, like, what's gonna happen?" And interestingly, I had to get my dopamine rush from making art, and so as soon as I was able to sit up in a chair after, like, 2 weeks of after each of my surgeries, I just got out my art supplies and started making art and started this sketchbook, and that really kind of healed me. And I think, it's definitely not the same as cycling, but it got me through. And I think, I think that art is this kind of search for me. It's a search for meaning, it's a search for goodness. It's a search for joy. I love the sense of completion that I have when I start something and make progress on it, even if I don't finish the thing, although finishing something and looking at it and being like, this is done. I really like the way this looks. There's nothing, and it's a similar kind of like adrenaline or dopamine rush that you get when you finish a bike race and you've done really well, or that you the best you could have for you. There is a similar kind of like hormonal thing that happens in your body when you create something that you like, or this sense of completion.
I haven't experienced that yet. Just
You
full disclosure.
will. And I think that's another thing that it's important to remember is that I wrote this book on finding your creative voice. And part of what I talk about in that book is this like this idea of being in the flow. I get to be in the flow a lot because I'm not grappling with how to do things.
Mhm.
I've mastered that, right? And I think that similar thing happens when you're an athlete. Like when you're not scared of descending a chunky gravel descent, you
Yeah.
can be in the flow of descending. But if you're scared, it's terrifying, right? If you don't know how to do it well.
Yeah.
And it's a similar thing in art making. It's like if you're always thinking about like, oh, what color goes with what color should I use next? Or I don't know how to use this medium, it's hard to get into the flow. And I'm really lucky because I'm in the flow way more with my art than I am riding my bike, for sure. And I also think there's this way that regardless of whether or not you are in the flow or you've experienced that yet, there is this way that art making forces you to be present.
Mm,
Yeah, sure, you can listen to a podcast while you're drawing or scribbling or whatever, but there you have to sort of be in what you're doing.
yeah.
I also think the same is true of riding a bike. If you're not, you're going to crash. You have to pay attention to where you are in that moment. And I love that so much. And I think that art making is for me very relaxing, um, and grounding, and it keeps me kind of focused and centered, and it helps me work through anxiety and things that big ideas that I'm grappling with.
Mhm.
And I also feel really lucky because um, I have this talent that I can then channel into doing something that gives back to the world. Like I make art that has messages in it that impact people or that advocate for things that I care about. Like I have this way to express my thoughts and my opinions and my beliefs and everything that I think is good in the world. And I have a way that I can express that. And I feel really lucky, and I don't take that for granted because I know some people really struggle. Like they want to make a difference in the world, but they're just not sure how. And I
Yeah.
have this thing that I have at my fingertips that I can use, not that I don't also have other skills that I use to be a change agent in the world, but like creativity has really given me that. Um, and it's really amazing. Like I think that's part of what's so satisfying about it to me. It's like, yeah, I can make things that sell and I can pay myself and pay my employees, and that's great. But like when I get that email that something I made or drew or said changed somebody's life
Yeah.
or made them think about something differently, or, I get to raise money for causes by selling things, like that's to me where the meat is, like one of my values is service. And like if I can be of service through my art, then it's even more profoundly, you know, satisfying to me. And like, I just, that kind of like the gift of creativity, is wonderful for me internally, but it's also something that I can be in community with other people
Yeah.
around. And that is pretty cool.
I got your set of, I'm looking right here. You've got a really cool deck that's like of values, like
Mhm,
defining your values. And
mhm.
I got that during a pretty dark time during my concussion recovery of like, what am I doing? I'm not a competitive athlete anymore. Like,
Who am I? Yeah.
that doesn't matter. Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do for work? How am I going to make meaning? And I sat down with your deck, and it was really hard because you have to kind of define and only 10, like there's like 100 and something cards, and then they're beautifully designed. And then you have to kind of pick. And I've gone through the practice a few times and I've gifted that deck quite a lot, but
Oh,
it
thank you.
actually really, it really helped me to define what I stand for, and I have to thank you for that. And
Mm.
I'll share, the cards, I keep them kind of sitting close by. I can't find them right now, but I think I even did a post about that and tagged you and put it out into the world of like, this is what I stand for. And not all of us have a public way to say what we stand for.
Yeah, it's like it's about what you stand for, and what's important to you that you can use to like guide your life. Like every single day, we all wake up and we have so many choices about how we can respond to things that happen. Bad things are going to happen in everybody's life, but you have choices about how you respond. And you have choices about the kinds of friendships you want to have in your life. And you have choices, some things we don't have choices about, but we have a lot of things that we do have choices about. And when you understand what your values are, like what are the most important things to you, it will help you make better decisions and make decisions that are aligned with like the core of who you are. And it's funny, that is my best-selling product, that values deck. I made it with my friend Andrea, and it something that we had done a value, each kind of separately done values exercises in different professional contexts that really changed our lives, and like figured this out about each other and decided to make this deck. And I also work with a business coach, and she does a lot of work around values. And it has been some of the most profound work I've ever done, because really knowing, yeah, what you stand for, what's important to you, um, can just help uh, shine a light on, you know, how you should be living,
And where you put your energy. I
Yeah,
mean,
where
for
you put your energy. That's
the
right.
hardest part, like I looked at all 150 cards and they're all like really good and I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. I found myself like I wanted to choose 50
Mhm.
cards. And then I'm like, oh no, but the rules say 10. And like I'm a bit of a rule follower. I'm a Virgo too. And so I'm like,
I'm married to a Virgo.
I had like 11. And I'm like, but she said 10, And so the kind of mental gymnastics of really like editing down, because a lot
Yeah,
of us
it's like all those values are important,
they're
and you
all
might,
values.
but what matters the most to you? And this forced choice is, I think, really hard for some people, but can be a very profound experience. And really like walking around just sort of knowing your values, and using them as a barometer for, what you choose in your life. And because I've done so much of this work, both with my coach and on my own, and then with other people through the values deck, I have a really kind of strong sense of what my own values are. And I will notice that the way I show up, for example, in the cycling world, and the way I show up, as an artist, the way I show up in my friendships or my relationships, um, when something in any of those arenas feels off, it's usually because
Yeah.
something's happening, or I'm doing something, or I'm sort of showing up out of obligation in some area that's not aligned with what's really important to me. And um and when things do feel good, it's usually because they're very tightly connected to what's the most important to me,
Yeah.
generosity and service, joy, and like those are 3 of my 10. And um they have really become guiding forces because so many people don't know like what is important to they have no clue what their values are. No clue.
And
And
that
so it's
goes back to the gift of age and becoming
Mhm,
growing older and having
mhm,
life experience. And
mhm,
so often we want to, elder in the Western culture is like a bad word. Whereas
mhm,
in, indigenous cultures, like your elders are the ones with wisdom.
mhm,
And they're the
mhm,
ones who like figured it out. And I remember sitting with my grandma and grandpa. And so I think this is a really cool way of helping people, maybe if elders aren't around, or
mhm,
to sit with yourself and be like, okay, there is a teacher in there, but I
yeah.
need tools to maybe sort of draw it
Mhm,
out of myself.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I just recently started referring to myself as an elder Gen Xer, and it's something that I'm really proud of. So
Tell me about that. So what made you say I'm an elder Gen Xer?
well, I figured out that, I have most of my close friends are 10 years or 12 years younger than I am.
Mm,
Like I have a pretty tight group of 2 tight groups of friends. And I say there's a couple who are on the verge of 50, but like most of my friends are in their 40s and they're also Gen Xers, but they're on the sort of like, and so I'm because I'm 10 or 12 years older than them, I started thinking of myself as like I'm like we're a couple years away from being boomers, but like we're elder Gen Xers. And like that just I don't know, it's something that I really identify with being a Gen Xer. I am definitely like have a lot of the like characteristics of a lot of Gen Xers, and how we grew up, with like parents who were off working and we were kind of on our own, took care of ourselves. And like there was no such thing as helicopter parenting at the time, right? Like we were left alone to do our own thing and we were very resourceful and responsible. We don't complain. I mean, I'm sure there are some Gen Xers who do complain, but like, there's no preciousness about anything. We're kind of hard knocks people.
mhm,
And most of us were raised by, people in the silent generation who were extra hard knocks.
mhm,
So I don't know. It's just something that I've really embraced. And this idea of being an elder, I was interviewed for a book that my friend Grace wrote she interviewed all of these like older women about their wisdom. And
yeah,
I was part of the book. And it was just, for me, it was such an honor. Getting old, so many aspects of getting older are so hard for me. Your body changes in ways that you cannot imagine when you're even in your early 40s. Like by the time you're in your 50s, just like things change so much. And you look in the mirror and you're like, am I? And and then I become more forgetful and you have brain fog and there's just like hormonal stuff that's happening. And all of a sudden I'm like closer to 60 than I was to 50. And a lot of that can be very anxiety producing and kind of feel hard and sad, like I'm grieving this former self, right? And yet, if you choose to, you can look at it as something that is inevitable and I'm going to make the best of it. And I'm going to look at the kind of like the, the positive side of it. And part of what I get to own now is like being an elder and kind of having some life experience and not giving as many fucks as I used to about what people think about me or what I say, and that's been felt really empowering. Um, there are so many upsides to getting older. It's something that I've really, I wrote this book which you held up earlier called A Glorious Freedom: Older Women Leading Extraordinary Lives, and I wrote that when I was in my 40s. And now I'm in my 50s and I think that was sort of like me laying the groundwork for myself. Like I'm really going to embrace this change that I'm about to go through. I'm going to celebrate it by making this book about what I'm going through and what other people have also been through. And it feels now I wish that I had known who you were at the time because I would have interviewed you for the book. Because you were also a very, a late bloomer and somebody who did something really amazing, at an older age. Um, but I just want to be an example to other people of what you can do. Like I may never be the fastest cyclist in the world, but I'm going to do hard things and I'm going to go try as many things as I can that are hard. And I'm always going to push myself as an artist to do new and different things. And I think that's how we stay young and that's how we stay alive is just like pushing ourselves and trying new things.
Well, this period that we're both in that you're talking about, it's called middlescence. And
Yes.
it's basically like adolescence. It's the time in our life where we go through massive transition, but in the, middle years. And we didn't used to live this long. And so people are having to figure out, living into their 80s and 90s, like there's a big transition, 40s to whenever. And it takes, help. There's a lot of support for kids in adolescence, and there's now starting to be support for
Yes.
adults in middlescence. And I'm actually really like you, I'm embracing the elder. It's like I feel really proud that here and I'm
Mhm.
still an athlete and I'm doing these things. And I'm working with a group founded by Chip Connolly, and he's another author, but it's called Modern Elder Academy, and it's the
Mm,
world's first midlife wisdom school. And it's all about people, in this transition of life, and like what contribution will be sort of your second half, and making the
mm,
second half as good or better than
mm.
the first half, instead of like our parents' generation. Maybe like you reach 50, you're kind of like sitting on the porch swing and but you and I aren't ready to do that yet, and a lot of people aren't ready to sit on the porch swing yet.
Yeah, I feel like I have more energy now. I mean, not always physically, but like in general, sort of like spiritual and life energy now to like do things and try new things than I ever had before. And I'm so excited to have tapped into that in the last few years because I feel like I have so much to look forward to and so much life to live, And it's hard for me to believe that, for a lot of, people our age, it's like they feel like their life is ending, you
Yeah.
know? They're retiring from their career, they don't know what's next, and um I feel really lucky and grateful that I have so much that I want to do with the rest of my life that I can't I actually just like can't wait to get started. So,
Well, and you've got some tools like art and movement that are keeping your brain and your body healthy and keeping you excited. And those really are critical factors in trying new things and keeping moving. And you've inspired me to, even though like I'm bumbling around with art, I'm called to it for some reason. I just need to develop the skill set. So
well, I also think that like A, you're not going to develop the skill set unless you bumble around, and B, sorry, somebody's
it's okay.
banging something in across the hall. Um and B, you can't actually, you know, I think it's important to remember that the act of bumbling with art materials is so stimulating for your brain.
Yeah.
That really the goal isn't to become an exceptional artist. It might be for you and it might be for other people, but really like part of the power of art is just doing the bumbling and like messing around.
To give myself permission to bumble and make bad things, that's a little hard for me to accept.
Yeah, and embrace the wonkiness of it. I mean, I think the character in like really great art is that it's not perfect and like really embracing imperfection I think is so important when you're in that stage where you're just sort of figuring out who you are and what you like to draw and what you're good at and what you want to pursue more of. It's so important and it's so regardless of like whether you make anything that you'd ever want to show anyone else, the fact that you're doing it is so important.
I'll
Yeah.
show you that green and blue thing up there is my first piece of art that really it's bones, it's jaw bones. I collect bones when I'm walking the dogs that are just jaw,
Amazing.
and I made that. I put it together, and it's called Speak from the Heart.
I
And
love
so
it.
the
That's
shop
amazing.
or your voice and your heart. But yeah, I just put it like bones together in a heart shape. But
So
I
good.
like it and it's fun. So I hung it
That's
up.
what's important, you know? Yeah.
So, last question as we wrap up. This is called What's the Rush? And the whole concept of it is based on me taking a minute and having some introspection, and have spent a lifetime chasing and running and going. So, I like to ask everyone, what are you now working on, either shedding or slowing down? Or,
Mm.
yeah.
It's funny, I have this, like, sign on my desk right next to me, and there are 2 statements on it. One is "Take your time," and the other is "Choose the path of least resistance,"
Mm,
which is sort of antithetical to a lot of the way that I've lived my life. I gotta choose the challenging thing, and I still want to embrace that. I feel like you can have both. You can both choose resistance and then also choose times where you're choosing the easy path, instead of the hard path. Um, right now, I've been in this kind of physical recovery space for a while. I am, you know, I just like went through this really hard, painful physical and mentally hard also experience of having a double knee replacement. And um I'm getting really sort of like bogged down a little bit with, because I'm not 100% healed yet and it's going to take a while. Like, will my life ever be the same again? Will I ever be able to ride my bike as fast as I did before? Will I ever be able to be as active as I was before? And who knows, maybe I'll be able to, be faster and more active. We just don't know yet. I think what I'm trying to shed is like this sense that I have limitations. And I want to be realistic about, and my body will tell me when when I've reached my limit, but I really am interested in just sort of like shedding this tendency I have to say like um I'm never going to feel better, or I'm never going to be able to do this thing again or that thing again. Um I do love, I'm really trying to embrace this idea of getting older, as I was just talking about, and I do genuinely feel excited by it. But I also am constantly coming up against, limitations all the time, like um, physical limitations or what I perceive as limitations. And I don't know that I've ever, especially as an athlete, I think as an artist, I really have had the experience of opening myself up to achieving way more than I ever imagined possible. But as an athlete, I think I've always had this sort of idea of what my limits are and what I can accomplish. And I want to shed that. I want to like really believe that I can climb harder and faster, and that I can um I don't know, reach new heights, especially now that I have these new supposedly bionic knees, that they'll actually help me to become a better athlete, and that there's nothing wrong with wanting that at 57, you know, that I really like, that I'm excited about where the future takes me, and I want to think more broadly about what that could mean as an athlete at my age. So it's hard for me to go there sometimes, but I want to shed my self-doubt in that area.
I love that. And thank you for being honest with us. And I will just reflect some of your own um, wisdom back on you, is that all the rules, you actually have an art, you wrote a blog about it, the 10 ways to navigate life and art and everything, all the structure and the sort of trail map for what you're working towards. You already have that from the art
Mhm.
world. Can you take
Yeah,
it and put it over here? And I
yeah,
bet you can. So
I
you
hope so.
actually already have the answers.
Thank you. I hope so.
Lisa Congdon, thank you for being on What's the Rush. What a cool episode. This one went a little longer because I just felt like we could go a lot of places. And I really appreciate you inspiring me to draw and I mean everything. You're like all your books are right here. I'm just gonna this first book, this was the it says I wrote in here, I'll just show everyone the first picture I drew as an
It's
adult.
a
It says
butterfly.
May 2nd, 2024, hello to my first art book. And I drew a butterfly in the front page.
Mhm.
And so thank you for helping me be a little bit of a butterfly. You're an amazing, amazing human and you're a gift to the world.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me.
It's a long and dusty road and a hot and heavy load. Folks I meet ain't always kind. Some are bad, some are good, some have done the best they could. Some have tried to ease my troubling mind. And I can't help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.